Imagine a child sitting alone in a wood-paneled living room, the low hum of a heavy tube television filling the silence as the sun sets outside. There's no parent in the kitchen, no smartphone in the hand, and no digital footprint tracking their location. This is the Latchkey Kid era, the origin story of a generation defined by a quiet, steely independence. They are the middle children of history, sandwiched between the massive cultural gravity of the baby boomers and the digital native explosion of the millennials. They are Generation X, the demographic that learned to look both ways before crossing the street because, quite literally, no one else was watching. To truly understand the psychology of Gen X, we have to look at the world they inherited, a world of transition, uncertainty, and a strange kind of freedom that wouldn't be allowed today. Born roughly between 1965 and 1980, this cohort grew up during a period of massive social upheaval. They saw the rise of the divorce rate, the Cold War's lingering shadow, and the total transformation of the workforce. But unlike the generations that followed, they didn't have a 24-hour news cycle or a social media feed to process it. They had to figure it out on their own. This created a psychological blueprint built on self-reliance, a healthy dose of skepticism, and a unique get-it-done attitude that defines them even now. When we look at the childhood of a typical Gen Xer, the word that comes up most often is autonomy. They were the first generation to experience the dual-income household or the single-parent home at a massive scale. While boomers were raised in the post-war nuclear family ideal, Gen X saw that ideal fracture. They came home to empty houses, fix their own snacks, and manage their own time. Psychologically, this fostered what experts call an internal locus of control. They learned early on that if something was going to happen, they had to be the ones to do it. This is why, in the workplace today, you'll often find Gen Xers are the ones who loathe micromanagement. To them, being watched over feels like an insult to a capability they mastered before they were 10 years old. This independence wasn't just about survival, it was about the culture they consumed. Gen X was the last generation to have a truly analog childhood and a digital adulthood. They remember the rotary phone, but they built the internet. This bridge status gives them a psychological flexibility that is rare. They can navigate a paper map just as easily as a GPS, and they value authenticity because they grew up in an era where selling out was the ultimate sin. The grunge movement of the early 90s wasn't just about distorted guitars. It was a psychological rebellion against the polished, corporate artifice of the 80s. It was a cry for something real, something raw, and something unmanufactured. Think about the media of that time. Movies like The Breakfast Club or reality bites weren't just entertainment, they were mirrors. They reflected a generation that felt misunderstood by their parents and ignored by society. This led to the slacker label, a term used by elders who mistook Gen X's skepticism for laziness. In reality, it wasn't laziness. It was a refusal to buy into a system that they saw as inherently broken. Why work 60 hours a week for a company that might fire you the moment the stock price dips? Gen X saw their parents go through those layoffs, and they decided to protect their own mental health and independence instead. As they transitioned into adulthood, this skepticism morphed into what many called cynicism. But if you look closer, it's actually a form of pragmatic realism. Gen X witnessed the fall of the Berlin Wall, the Challenger explosion, and the AIDS crisis. They saw institutions they were told to trust, governments, corporations, even the traditional marriage, struggle or fail. Consequently, their loyalty isn't given away for free. They are loyal to people, not brands. They are loyal to results, not rhetoric. They have a built-in BS detector that is finely tuned, making them some of the most discerning consumers and employees in history. The Gen X sense of humor is another vital piece of the puzzle. It's often dry, sarcastic, and self-deprecating. This wasn't just a style, it was a survival mechanism. In a world where the stakes felt high, but the individual felt small, humor was a way to reclaim power. It's the deadpan delivery that says, I see exactly what's happening, and I'm choosing to laugh at the absurdity of it. This perspective allows them to remain calm in crises that might send other generations into a panic. They are the ones you want in the room when the lights go out. because they've already spent half their childhood figuring out how to navigate the dark. Interestingly, as Gen X enters the sandwich generation phase of life, their psychology is being tested in new ways. They are currently caring for aging boomer parents while simultaneously supporting millennial or Gen Z children. This puts them in a unique position of being the emotional shock absorbers of society. They are the ones holding the line, managing the chaos, and doing it with that signature, whatever shrug that hides a deep well of resilience. They don't complain much, mostly because they grew up knowing that complaining didn't get the door unlocked or dinner on the table. We also have to consider the middle child syndrome of this generation. For decades, the media has been obsessed with the friction between boomers and millennials. Gen X has been largely left out of that conversation, and honestly, they kind of like it that way. There's a psychological comfort in being the stealth generation. They operate under the radar, getting things done without the need for constant validation or public acclaim. This lack of a need for external praise makes them incredibly durable in high-pressure environments. They are the fixers who don't need a trophy just for showing up. But this independence has a shadow side. Because they were raised to be so self-reliant, many Gen Xers struggle to ask for help when they actually need it. There is a deep-seated fear of being a burden or appearing weak. This can lead to a sense of isolation or burnout as they try to carry the weight of their families and careers entirely on their own shoulders. For a Gen Xer, "I've got it" is both a badge of honor and a potential trap. They have to learn that reaching out isn't a sign of failure, but a necessary part of the human experience they often tried to bypass by being tough. In terms of career and money, Gen X's psychology is defined by a desire for work-life balance long before it became a buzzword. They saw the workaholic culture of the 80s and the toll it took on their parents' health and marriages. As a result, they were the ones who pushed for flexible schedules and remote work options decades ago. They value their time as much as their paycheck, perhaps more so. They work to live, they don't live to work. This makes them surprisingly modern in their outlook, even if they arrive at that conclusion through a lens of 1990s disaffection. Even their relationship with parenting is distinct. Having been raised with so much freedom, sometimes too much, many Gen X parents swung the pendulum back, becoming highly involved in their children's lives. Yet they still try to instill that same grit they possessed. They want their kids to be safe, but they also want them to be capable. It's a delicate psychological balancing act, providing the safety net they didn't have, while hoping their children never actually need it. They are the generation of helicopter parents who still secretly want their kids to go outside and stay there until dark. The psychological impact of the 1980s cannot be overstated. This was the era of the stranger danger campaigns and the milk carton kids. It was a time of intense fear-mongering juxtaposed with an almost total lack of actual supervision. This created a generation that is hypervigilant. They are always scanning for exits, always looking for the catch in a deal, and always prepared for the worst-case scenario. While this can lead to anxiety, it also creates an incredible level of competence. They are the ultimate preppers of the psychological world, ready for any shift in the social or economic climate. We should also talk about the Gen X relationship with pop culture. For them, music and film were a primary source of identity in a way that is hard to replicate today. Before the internet fragmented everything into a million tiny niches, Gen X had a shared cultural language. Whether it was the release of Star Wars, the rise of MTV, or the explosion of hip-hop, these moments were communal. This shared history provides a psychological anchor. It's why you see so much nostalgia for the 80s and 90s today. It's not just about the clothes or the music. It's about a time when the world felt both larger and more connected through a few key cultural touchstones. As Gen X approaches the later stages of their careers, we are seeing a shift in their psychological priorities. Many are moving away from the corporate ladder and toward legacy projects. They are starting small businesses, mentoring younger generations, and focusing on what truly matters. The cynicism of their youth has mellowed into a seasoned wisdom. They know they can't save the whole world, but they know they can make their corner of it a lot more functional and honest. To deepen our understanding, we must look at the specific psychological resilience born from the 1970s energy crisis and the economic malaise of their early years. Gen X learned early that resources were finite. They learned to fix things rather than replace them. This MacGyver mentality, the ability to create a solution out of a paperclip and some duct tape, is a core part of their psychological makeup. It makes them incredibly resourceful problem solvers who don't panic when the instructions are missing. Furthermore, the Gen X relationship with authority is fundamentally different from those who came before or after. They don't respect a title just because it's on a door. They respect competence. If a leader can't show they know what they're doing, Gen X will quietly find a workaround or simply do the job themselves. This horizontal view of the world, where everyone is judged by their output rather than their status, is a direct result of being raised in a world where the adults were often too busy or too overwhelmed to provide a clear hierarchy. We must also touch on the concept of the forgotten generation. Psychologically, being overlooked for so long has created a unique kind of freedom. Because the world wasn't constantly analyzing them or catering to them, Gen X was free to experiment, to fail, and to grow without the pressure of a digital audience. This has resulted in a generation that is remarkably comfortable with their own company. They don't need a constant stream of external validation because they spent so many hours in those quiet wood-paneled rooms learning who they were when no one was looking. This comfort with solitude also manifests in how they handle modern stress. While younger generations might feel a frantic need to stay connected at all times, many Gen Xers still find solace in unplugging. They know that the world won't end if they don't check their email for an hour. They have a psychological off switch that is a remnant of the analog world, and it serves as a powerful defense mechanism against the burnout of the modern age. Ultimately, the psychology of Generation X is a study in balance. They are the bridge between the old world and the new. They are the skeptical optimists who believe they can change the world, but only if they do the work themselves. They are the generation that moved from vinyl records to cassettes, to CDs, to MP3s, and finally to streaming, adapting at every turn without losing their core identity. They are resilient because they had to be, independent because they were left to be, and real because they refused to be anything else. As the world continues to change at a dizzying pace, the Gen X perspective becomes even more valuable. In a world of noise, they offer silence. In a world of fleeting trends, they offer substance. In a world of constant surveillance, they offer a reminder of what it means to be truly free. They are the generation that reminds us that while the world might be complicated, your response to it doesn't have to be. You just have to keep moving, keep questioning, and keep being yourself. Think about the silence of the Gen X childhood again. That silence wasn't just empty space. It was a laboratory. It was where they learned to entertain themselves, where they learned to think critically, and where they formed a sense of self that wasn't dependent on likes, shares, or comments. That internal solidness is their greatest psychological gift. It's a groundedness that serves as an anchor for the more frantic generations that surround them. They are the calm in the storm, not because they aren't worried, but because they've been through storms before and they know they have the tools to survive. They carry with them the ghosts of the shopping mall and the arcade, the smells of old library books and sun-baked asphalt. These sensory memories aren't just nostalgia. They are the foundations of a psychological architecture built on physical experience. They lived in the world before it was filtered through a screen, and that gives them a perspective on reality that is increasingly rare and incredibly precious. They are the curators of common sense in an age of digital chaos. As we wrap up this deep dive into the mind of the Latchkey Generation, it's worth reflecting on your own life. Whether you are a Gen Xer yourself, or you work with one, or you're being raised by one, understanding this need for autonomy and authenticity changes how you interact with the world. It's not just about an age group. It's about a specific way of seeing the world that values the real over the virtual and the deed over the word. They have spent a lifetime being ignored, and in that space, they built something incredibly strong. They are Gen X, the generation that doesn't need you to notice them to know that they are essential. They are the bridge, the fixers, and the quiet survivors of a world that forgot to watch them grow up. Links to recommended self-help books in the description, and if you like this content, drop a comment and subscribe.